pretty much everything from that suit that we're hearing about is absolutely what I would expect to happen behind the scenes at Tucker Carlson's show. And it's also absolutely horrific. Commonly referring to women as cunts, and I get to say that because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And just, the completely demeaning and derogatory way he treats his staff. They also made sure to include some fun anti-Semitism against her, and like put a Christmas tree next to her desk and put a little sign on it that said Hanukkah bush.
Oh, they're just charming people.
Wow, that's evil. Like
Yeah.
I don't think they do that at Wolfram and Hart. They're just sort of like, oh, come on, we're evil here. We've got work to do.
Like, when I say that people like think that they're living in West Wing, but that's not even what Dick Durbin is doing. Like, you're right. It is closer to just like pure comedy. And so, Dick Durbin has decided, as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, which needs to advance all of Biden's judges in order for them to actually become judges, has decided that the most important thing to do is to follow not even a rule, but a courtesy that has been in place to allow home state senators to unilaterally veto judges from their state. And so, like, just to put a little context in this from the last few years, since this is a completely archaic thing that shouldn't exist anymore, under the Trump administration, Democrats, and again, this was another thing that Democrats were like, we're not going to fight fire with fire. We're going to pretend everything is nice and normal. They returned 130 blue slips for Trump judges. And we all know who these fucking Trump judges were.
Yeah.
But they were still like, we need to play nice, and we're going to just keep governing like everything is normal, and we can all be friends and go hang out at the Whites Only Country Club after this. And
and Rubio is terrible. Again, Rubio's awful, but he was like a serious contender for the presidency before he got swiped. I mean, the Republican establishment really wanted him to run and whatever in ways that, and there's just not amongst the Gen X or whatever. And people will say, don't be ageist, don't be whatever. I think it's not that old people suck. Old people are wonderful. I do think for Democrats, you have serious issues when it is you're trying to beat a rising fascist movement. Fascist movements, their strength is in youth. And you've got Turning Point USA controlling things and the leaders are going to those conventions, the Charlie Kirk. I don't know the Democratic version of Charlie Kirk. Maybe there is that there.
Well, but I think for one, we don't really like lift people up to those kinds of positions. Like there aren't like.
Oh no, we eat our young.
What?
We eat our young. We eat our young. We don't elevate them.
Yes. But like we don't really like lift people up in that way. And like, where like you see him meeting with all the senators and everything. It's sort of more of a we have to we're the aristocracy and we will, keep separate and apart from everyone else. So there's that sort of vibe. I also think, to our credit, I don't think that people on the left look for leadership and like to be told how to be as much as Republicans do. It's why they have like a lot more like scammy kind of people who are like, oh, here, let me, sell you a bunch of stuff and then tell you how to exist. We don't really have a lot of that in general because we're kind of
but there is a sort of there is a youth movement, and that youth movement is airing fascists, and the organization, the infrastructure to organize a counter movement amongst the left does not exist. It's more about yelling at that group. It's just like eating the young, and that is dangerous. And also, you just have more and more people who are just not part of this period. So the messages are totally different. I get, so as I said, I get emails from, please give me money, democracy is at stake. I loved Joe Biden's campaign messaging about how this is about democracy. This is about what these guys are trying to do. Here's what the MAGA movement's trying to do. And then you have Durbin and Stabenow and Feinstein, these are folks who just aren't connected. Like the idea that I've made this comparison before, Feinstein would be like, look, if it's peacetime and your generals are kind of old and fat and they're like, look, it's harmless, go see out your retirement, go out every day and count the planes, we'll be fine. But if you're actually at war, okay, we need some
you can say it, go ahead and say it.
What? Say what?
You need a wartime consigliere.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, you need people who are aware of what's happening most of the times. And it's very fascinating because I've always written it's become sort of overtly it's not even more so than youth, but almost from a racial standpoint because of youth. So people of color were never part of that country club. So you're kind of just like, what are you doing? Why are you guys behaving this way? Why do you so desperately want to be friends with these guys? And and I do think because they don't, and then younger, I think the benefit of youth is that they just don't remember a different time, which is good. I feel, I would be the same way if I'm closing in on 50 and I'd be like, oh, I remember when this is what it was like in theater. And so it's very easy to get shackled by, oh, we were able to do this 30 years ago. And someone was like, well, no, actually for the past 10 years, it's just not, it's sort of to be more aware of what's happening. And that's just not what's occurring right now.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but like we are facing like people who are fascists. Like there are actual fascists who we are fighting against right now. And the idea that institutions are going to save us from fascism is kind of fascinating to me.
Well, that's a common democratic problem. And I had this discussion with a good friend of mine about, who was about January 6th and the reaction to it, and that we're prepared for it now, what it'll happen and so forth. And it was sort of, well, that's, I appreciate that point of view, but I was coming at it from the standpoint of a lot of people on the right who said, okay, well, I can't overturn these results in Pennsylvania. You have no case. Oh, look, I can't vote. I can't do this. It's overtly lawless. A lot of this was based on the idea that there would be consequences for doing it. Like for all of us, we would like to all think that we are Christ-like. We are not. I feel like for a lot of us, there are things think of what you would actually do if you knew either that no one would ever know or there would be no consequences. And I know, Robbins has been meeting with a nun earlier, so I think she will believe that she is so nice that there's nothing she would ever do.
I went to go see Sister Helen Pugin speak, and it was amazing. She's amazing. So,
but
she's a nun all that for.
But I think there's a lot that people they behave according to laws. And it's not because of the institutions, but because there's accountability. Like if you break this, there's if it's found out that a billionaire is my sugar daddy and I'm on the Supreme Court, I'm going to face ruin and social isolation, and I'll be thrown off. If not, if there's nothing they really on paper can do,
party time.
I'm just going to keep doing it. So what you're saying, the institutions don't really protect you because eventually Republicans are just gonna we're just gonna steal the election. The stuff that came out with Ted Cruz, and he was talking about doing it. And I was saying, well, the question no one is asking is in those conversations, two things had to either they're talking about violence. They're talking about once we steal it, okay, well, obviously people are going to be really mad. It's obvious Biden won. He clearly won the popular vote.
Yeah.
We're going to say, oh, yeah, there's fraud and steal it and put Trump back in office. Surely we're going to have either martial law or some preparation, or, and this is more damning and perhaps more true, they knew Dick Durbin, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, they knew Dick Durbin, Dianne Feinstein, they would fold. If
Yeah,
if
they would
if it had
ultimately go
worked,
along with it in order to preserve the norms. I mean, honestly, like it goes back to the Supreme Court in Bush. Like their actual decision was, you know, well, he thinks he's president, so we can't really. What are we going to do? Like that, it was basically like it's going to interfere with his, personal belief that he is president now, or something like that. I forget what the exact ruling was, but it was something along those lines. Like,
yes,
like
I
we're not
tried
gonna give him
to
the votes because he
yeah.
thinks he's president.
I tried to use that in my case against Bibi Noor for when she should marry me based on my personal belief that we were in fact married, and they threw my case out of
Yeah.
court because there was not it, there is no precedent. They even said, "Here's our thing, but you can never use it again because obviously it's crazy and
Yeah.
Bush is now president." But there's literally it's not precedent establishing because it's nuts. But you're about to say, Jamie, about the Durbin. Essentially, the idea is that they, as I had postulated, they believed that there was we could cue this the hell out. If we put him back in, Democrats aren't going to do anything. They would just
Yeah.
go along with it and fundraise.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that is exactly what they've shown us over the last several years. Like, and it's also just infuriating, as like people who have worked our ass off, like not just voting, getting out the vote, doing everything we possibly can because we are literally trying to save our democracy. And then we get these people in power and they refuse to actually stand up and fight.
Well, the blue slips are the smallest. It's not even escalation. It's just like these guys did not follow this ruling when it was in place. So
Yep.
why should we? And it doesn't make any sense. Like they're
Yep.
not fair actors anymore.
And this is after we already gave Trump a shitload of judicial vacancies to fill, in large part because Patrick Leahy, when he was Judiciary Chair, gave even more deference to Republicans than Durbin is.
Well,
so this is not
It's just dangerous because to me, as the black guy, it's just sort of like these are just powerful white people who just can't. So the people who are supposed to protect my rights are very powerful white men and women who have more in common with those guys than they do their own voters. And that becomes even more a problem because Marjorie Greene and Lauren Boebert, they are the Republican voter. They're the off the chain, as the Richard Pryor expression about how in Alabama they have like white folks who scare white folks. They keep them chained in a leash and they're like, rah, 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 they let them out. Like that's Marjorie Greene. It's like, oh my God. Like they're the ones running the show.
Yeah.
And McCarthy listens to them. There is no equivalent of that. And, McCarthy says to Marjorie Greene and Lauren Boebert or Fox News, and Democrats are listening to David Brooks. Remember that was Obama was desperate to get David Brooks support for issues because then it's like, oh, then it's nice and bipartisan and Republicans will like me if David Brooks signs off. So
which
that's been
happens
challenging.
so many times. I mean, I can't even begin to count how many times that definitely happened.
So but I think we run on time now, or though we could go a little bit longer and I could just chop it into an extra special edition. But this was that sort of legal debacle and that's sort of the Supreme Court. But like because I know a lot of the Blue MAGA folks will say, Stephen, Jamie, Robin, you're being unfair. Like what can you do? Like what can you do? Because they won't show up. They don't have the votes to remove these guys, so they can do whatever they want. Like what could be practically done to make things uncomfortable for them?
Well, Dick Durbin tomorrow could stop being a Republican ally with the blue slips and we could get some more fucking judges confirmed. Because that is literally him. It is literally up to him and only him. And he is the one who's doing that. So like that is something that can change today. But like, you were talking about Gingrich earlier and like, you know what? That is one thing he was right on, was saying that we need to get rid of just this pure seniority for everything, and make it actually more of a meritocracy, you know, and it truly is insane that we are just still abiding by these things. Like I saw a tweet earlier today that was like, I get so fucking outraged sometimes because like there are so many things we need to change, but we can't because our grandfathers did it this way, and so we have to keep doing it this way. And like that is what we're fucking doing.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? The most important thing is that everyone uses the right fork. Like that is, you know, we all just have to understand that.
I have a question, Ro, for you. Stabenow's insane interview in the New Yorker, and that's all that was. That was I needed a hug. I was wandering the neighborhood in my robe and just like I had a mental break after this. So it seems because and again Pelosi the same thing of like people calling for Feinstein to retire or doing it for political purposes. And it seems like quite the dig to me, not so subtle dig to Barbara Lee to try to, because he will appoint someone. And if you don't want him appointing, and again, he's said on record, he would appoint a Black woman. So guess why it feels like it's a not so subtle dig at her, is that they don't want, well, she said, we can't meddle in this primary or something, but it's like, that's another year and a half. It has to be done. She's not going to make it, and she's not coming back. So like what?
But no, we would just rather give the Republicans the Senate for the next 2 years. You know, that's the reason.
It's really interesting.
That's insane. Like, that is we're not going to have the majority after 2025. And I know people, well, I'm not supposed to try to read the future, but
it's a real rough year.
It's you know, and so obviously it is so weird because we have a Democratic governor. There was the scariness during the recall where, oh my God, what if it's Elder? And Elder would have, I think he would either, whatever means legally, if he had won to pull Feinstein, he would have found, because it is like, she is not in the building, literally. She's not doing this job. And so, but at some point, right, there has to, like, okay, well, Newsom's going to have to appoint someone. Either it is sort of someone who, they talked about Barbara Boxer.
Yeah.
I'll again throw myself in the ring on that. I'll live in San Diego for a year and work remotely and just go vote. I can handle both jobs, Rebecca. and or just choose, accept that if he chooses Barbara Lee, she will have the incumbent advantage. That's fine. That's not the worst thing in the world, right? Or am I missing something?
Well, right. I mean, just don't try to sell the Senate seat like you're some governor from Illinois and you're good.
Well, I mean, she's like, but Stabenow was suggesting, because whenever they love, the Blue MAGA types love to compare this to with Fetterman, who it was transparent that he had a stroke and he was suffering. And that was a big deal to say, because like just even 10 years ago, the senator from Pennsylvania would have said, oh, I had a hunting accident. Oh, I broke my penis with a prostitute. Anything other than saying I have a mental. So that was a big deal to get over that stigma. And I applaud him for it, for doing that. But that all is clear as to what a path for that is for recovery. The recovery for, being 90 is less.
Right. Well, and I actually saw someone today being like, she has shingles. She'll be better in 2 to 4 weeks. And I'm like, shingles aren't the issue here.
Yeah, no.
That's, well,
I thought I had shingles. I did not have
shingles.
But we don't even know if it's shingles, right? Like we know, we have no reason to believe that. And I'm trying to be a conspiracy theorist that she could have it and it's far more complicated because of her age, or we don't know.
It could also be you're allergic to your laundry detergent, which is maybe something that happened to someone that we don't know personally.
Yeah. But there is such a difference between temporary issue that there, a health issue that there is a treatment plan for. If it were literally just shingles and she has to, take a few weeks off to recover, I have no problem with that. That is not what we're talking about. We are talking about not having a Democratic Senate for potentially the rest of Joe Biden's term.
Yeah.
Well, and we again, I swear it was at least 2 or 3 weeks ago, Robin, right? Like when we did this. So she's been out for a while. It's like since like most of this year.
Yeah.
And it's not, and there are no, I mean, as encouraging as the interview with the senator from Michigan was, I'm sure for California residents, there's a picture, there's a someone, there's no one, none of her young 60-year-old interns like got a film strip and whatever and made and posted that on YouTube or some evidence of life
on a newsreel.
News on the march. Dianne Feinstein feeling better than ever.
Maybe we need a redo of the movie Dave, but about a U.S. senator from California.
Well, I mean, that would be at least give me something other than begging Republicans. Before begging, that would have been me. I want to do the SNL sketch of this. Dick Durbin's like, let me just ask Republicans to be nice. And you would be like, so before we do that, there's Dave. Yeah. I met this lady. There's a lady at my church who kind of looks like Dianne Feinstein. Bring her in and have her vote. No. We'll just ask.
That's better than my weekend at Bernie's plan, probably.
Let's just bring like anything. Come on, they kind of blew their wad on the whole thing with the fake Fetterman. So they'll look silly if they say that it's a fake Feinstein. So this just doesn't make any sense. There's literally how the lack of transparency for that is scary. And then all the feminist stuff is especially ridiculous considering that the Leo McGarry of her is obviously not a woman, because that's often a problem with sort of CEO feminism is that you're in charge, but like everyone in your staff, there's no people of color and there's no women in top positions. So there's a man running, is effectively acting senior senator of California, who I'm sure as compelling as Feinstein's relatives might be, if they go to her, he is the one who stands to lose a lot. Because junior staffers, Barbara Lee might keep, but your top people are going to go. So you kind of want to make sure that there is some sort of objective sense of duty. Everyone's like, well, they voted for her. That was one Blue MAGA response. I guess they were hoping she'd show up. It was just like it's like if you don't go to work. Well, you did hire me. Yeah, we thought there was like an arrangement that you would come into the office or even at home, but there'd be a work product, but there isn't. So
here's what I would actually like to point out. This is in fact the exact opposite of identity politics. Like it's identity politics as the right understands it and makes, pretends in their head like, oh, this is what identity politics is. Just keep her in because she's a woman and she's, 90,000 years old. No. Actual identity politics would be, this hurts women. Her not voting hurts women. It hurts people of color. It hurts, their political interests are not being met because, it's the idea that people have different, interests politically based on their identity, which is factually true for everyone, and it's not, we're just electing people because of their, personal, genitalia. That's not what it actually is. And so, no, it's the opposite of identity politics because it's actually bad for pretty much everyone.
Well, yeah, I mean,
things are being advanced.
Well, arguably, this will get very philosophical in debate, but it's sort of the liberal ideas that from a collective, it's sort of the needs of the many.
Yeah.
And so as everyone's been responding to Feinstein, it really is like it's all about this one person over literally 40 million people. And that's very conservative. That's very like
Yeah.
it's my individual. It's like, why should I wear a mask
Yeah.
to protect billions, people? It's here. It's like a very sense of, well, and again, I don't get it because she's not even sort of doing the job. It's not
I
even
think
like
it's about
before.
protecting the establishment. I think that's really like what it's, ultimately
Sure,
about, more than her personally.
that makes a lot more sense. So can I dig into that, Robin? So what do you mean by that, like protecting the establishment? Or
Well,
what's the
there's
gain here?
definitely this absolute terror that she's going to be replaced by someone more liberal than she is. And, there's this idea
Just
that they do just want to keep
hmm.
people sort of like, much like the queen, like they're just queen until they die. And so that's sort of a very like, you know, that way you keep the same structure. That way
Hmm.
things don't change that much. And it is a very conservative outlook, because the whole idea of preserving the establishment has always been a conservative outlook until Trump, when Democrats were like, ooh, this can be our thing now. And I think that's very, very much what it's about. It's like, okay, we'll preserve this, we'll keep the same people forever, and people will be comfortable with that. And that will, represent safety on
Well,
some
who
level.
is
But on
the
the
who
change,
is the establishment candidate? I'm sorry, Ramos.
I
Who
would
is
say
the
it's like Feinstein, like she would be, representative of that, and that, the old guard and preserving the old guard.
I don't. I am not convinced Feinstein is still with us. I need to see. Like, I'm sorry. I'm going to be a motherfucker about this because that stab it out thing broke me. I was wondering the interstate after reading that. It like I'm reading this thing. Stab it out speaks out on where is the senator? It was like literally some North Korean shit. Like this is America. It's democracy. Where the fuck
Wait, is
is
she
the
a
actual
Scientologist?
senator? Where is
Yeah.
well, it's like a whole Brooklyn Nine thing of like
Yeah.
they go into the cult and it's like the lady Debbie who is still definitely alive. Wait a minute, ooh, Debbie dead. Yeah, she's real dead.
Yeah.
But I guess so. But the establishment candidate, if who's the so there is an establishment candidate if she resigns tomorrow that he could appoint. What's the controversy?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's just the idea that you're not supposed to, replace someone ever, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And something we haven't mentioned about like the ridiculous accusations of sexism is what Stephen mentioned earlier, that Newsom has said he would appoint a black woman to the seat. So,
But they need one who's not Barbara Lee, because, Barbara Lee is a little too left for them.
but Barbara Lee, is of course. I mean, she's has been old enough to rent a car for quite a while. She's got my sister's complexion, right? So she looks great, but she
Yeah.
herself is in her 70s. So I mean, but conscious and aware of her surroundings. So like
And
what
not hanging out with Shelly Miscavige anywhere.
it's just like another
right.
it's another 6 years. Like what I don't understand. What are you doing? Like why it just seems to be either you're unreasonably supportive of her. Because I guess I have trouble seeing. Okay, so it's her. She's not even like she makes does Barbara Lee make a big scene? So it's not like Barbara Lee is AOC. I mean, as far as what they don't like about her, I mean, she's a liberal, but are they really that afraid of what votes she would do or
I
what she
think
would
it's the
do for
whole
another year?
idea of, they found it disrespectful of AOC to primary Crowley. Like it's this idea that it's disrespectful to primary people unless your last name is Kennedy.
Well, you should be primaried, especially in districts where the only election is the primary because
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
so gerrymandered, and it also keeps you. There's an argument that if Feinstein had really compete in 2018, there would have been a difference. Like if you have to really stay on your feet and whatever, but if you're not, if it's just a sinecure, it just looks ridiculous. Well, so they don't like Schiff. I thought Blue MAGA
I
loved
don't
Schiff.
know. I guess they probably do, but they still want the legitimacy And the idea that, you would never, they don't want to break rules. And in their mind, that's a rule that had to become a rule. And they have, because otherwise all these progressives are going to think it's okay to replace people who aren't doing their job.
Robin,
and you know what?
I can't. Go ahead, Jamie.
Primary every single person in Democratic leadership.
I know. Yeah.
That is where I'm at.
Yeah,
I'm at term limits.
Illinois is my home state. If any young progressives are interested, hit me up.
I can't. I don't know, Robin. I don't know if I can fully accept that Democrats are this stupid and not go full Sylvia Plath. Like, cause that, I'm just a black man trying to survive in this world. I mean, but part of it, we talk about Dick Durbin and Dianne Feinstein and all these others. I mean, they're alive at a time. So we talk about democracies at stake, and even Joe Biden, the worst parts of reality. Like, America was an apartheid state. We're talking like where, and this woman was dragged back to hell from Ghost, the woman who falsely accused Emmett Till. But when that was going down, not that Biden's pro lynching, obviously not, and not that Feinstein or Durbin were stabbing out, or these people who are in their 70s or 80s, these white people, but they probably have like their memories of childhood is not Mississippi Burning. It's the opening of the Andy Griffith Show, right? Like, boop, boop, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum. Like, that's America, and it's lovely and it's wonderful. And so I'm terrified of living my grandfather's life, or my grandmother's life. They literally had a law in South Carolina that Black women weren't allowed to stay at home, so she had to work because it was legal for Black women not to work. And so when they were getting enough money the men were starting to make enough money that the women could stay at home and raise the kids. It was supposed to be the conservative thing, but white ladies can't raise their own kids. I can't be bothered. We need maids.
I never knew about that. Jesus.
Yes, that was a big thing in South Carolina, and my grandmother would have been impacted by it. So, so this type of thing, this is nightmare. It's not, that's what kind of bugs me about the Handmaid's Tale stuff, because it's kind of like, no. When you frame it as some dystopian reality, and like the empire, the Statue of Liberty is destroyed, and like there's a monkey sitting in Lincoln's chair, stuff like that. When you present it as that way, it just seems like, oh no, this will never, happen, as opposed to, no, this has happened. So what we're seeing in North Carolina, what we're seeing in Florida, what we're seeing, like, no. Being gay used to be terrible. If you're trans, whatever, to live this way. And it was at a time, I want leaders who remember that painfully. This is my life, not like watching it and being like, oh, that's a damn shame. Yeah. Let me go sit on the porch.
Not reminiscing about those days when you could hang out with your fellow white supremacists.
Exactly. So that is where we're running.
How swell busing is. I'm sorry, how bad busing is. They don't like that's
I don't know.
And meanwhile, I live in a state where women's reproductive systems are actually being governed by a law from before the Civil War.
Yeah, hopefully that will be able to be overturned.
Fingers crossed for the new Wisconsin Supreme Court, y'all.
I had to get too far into this before we go. So in Wisconsin, and I had written about Ron Johnson's latest ridiculousness about the climate when he was proposing how great it is this gets warmer, without understanding how anything works, of just like, well, yeah, it as great as it would be to be able to go to the beach in February. This is why you have no crops.
Yeah.
Like, like a child, like a genie has to tell a child, okay, well, don't wish for your grandfather to come back, because unless you're very specific. I normally don't say this, but you're 8 years old, so I don't want to. I feel like I should warn you. I'd probably bring him back, and he's like, and it's like, you don't want that. So, but he's like a child. And Mandela Barnes, I was like very frustrated Mandela Barnes lost, because I tend to get frustrated when Democrats lose. a lot of Hillary Clinton supporters don't like when I say that, but I tend to think that it's not the voters' fault, it's the candidate's fault when we lose. And but what comes up is like, oh, well, he said defund the police. This is why this happened or whatever. And then I will say, well, I'm concerned about 2024 because Wisconsin and these states, Kamala Harris, her approval is not very high in those states, especially amongst the swing voters, the voters who went from voting against Hillary for Trump to Biden. They don't like Harris any more than they did Clinton. And so I'm just very concerned in 2024 of a scenario where a lot of those voters are like, okay, both of these guys are on their way out. So I can kind of vote for Trump. I don't trust this guy. I don't like him, but I like Kristi Noem.
Yeah.
I like Nikki Haley. And that's who's really going to be president for a year. Right. But, oh my God, Biden, he's not going to make it. And I don't trust Kamala. And I don't trust. And so there's potential of that being more of a factor when you're top of the ticket is that advance. But what I'm getting is a lot of, well, the media's been mean to Harris. It's like, what? Please, again, I'm just a black man who's trying to stay alive. You got more, right? You got more than the media. Like I should just the media just needs to not be so mean to Kamala. It's like, okay, well, that's not gonna happen. Or they will say, well, Kamala will, even if she were even at the top of the ticket, Biden, hell, I'm having to Biden in 2024. Kamala will win because I'm gonna show you this photo of her wearing a pride shirt. It's like, okay, well, when I was like, I think, but when Robin was like, Elizabeth Warren could win all 50 states because here's her wonderful policies. You were saying, well, no, she can't win these states because of these voters. Even though, yes, you think those policies are awesome, those specific voters don't like her because of X, Y, and Z. So it just seems like you're doing the same thing that you said that Robin was being weird about, and the liberals who are not understanding why Warren was unelectable. So it's like a very weird thing there.
I do think that what's going to end up happening is, not this presidential, but the next one, they'll just let her run and be like, it's going to be Republican anyway. Like, I think that is probably more or less what is going to happen, just because you can't.
Robin, we can't. You understand that would be very bad.
Because it's more important that people have their turn.
But that never works. It never works.
Yeah. Well,
I don't understand.
It's the principle of the thing.
Oh my God. But in 2024, I'm very concerned about 2024 because Biden's age. I mean, it's what you can do. He can't ditch. I'm not saying he should ditch Harris. I'm just saying you need a better strategy for improving her numbers in those states than showing me how she's like Hillary Clinton, who lost those states. And maybe I'm being unfair and a misogynist, but Jamie, what's your take? You're in Wisconsin. Maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe she's very popular there.
No. And honestly, it is something that I always struggle with personally, because I don't think that we should if we always placated racism and sexism, our government would be entirely old white men instead of mostly old white men still to this day. So it's I do struggle with that personally, because especially if I voted for Liz Warren in the 2020 primary. And
oh wait, no, she dropped out before I got to vote, so I voted for Bernie. But yeah.
But so yeah, I don't know. I struggle with the idea of we should only nominate the women. But the thing is I was a very early Obama supporter when he ran. I loved him from when he was in the Illinois State Senate, because I followed Illinois state politics. But he was we do not really have anyone who's in like the pipeline of, the people who are expected to be elevated as the Democratic leadership who has anywhere close to his charm and charisma and speaking ability. And like, as much as I would be fine with a boring person who's a huge policy wonk, that is not what the rest of the Americans
I guess. Well, my thing with Obama. Well, my thing with Obama, and I kept pointing out, he's from the Midwest, so he did well in the Midwest. He's a Midwest guy, and a lot of his even kind of dadness he has an essential Midwesternness that I would argue the only reason people don't see that is if you're racist, as opposed to saying you should. It's one thing to be like, oh, you're a racist because you don't like something that you would have every reason not to like, right? Because of you legitimately don't like this. Oh, you're a racist. I don't like that. But like, no, it's like, well, why wouldn't you like this guy? Oh, and that was more Obama's issue, which is very different to me than Harris's challenges. Okay, well, this is a senator from California, not Illinois. This is someone who does not have a lot of overtly Obama's challenges, does not have a lot of Biden strengths. And okay, how does Harris do better than Hillary Clinton? What are the differences? And whenever I ask that, because I guess it becomes this sort of circular thing, because you can't, for a lot of blue MAGA, they can't admit, or K-Hiver as the term is, they can't admit that Hillary was a flawed candidate in any way. Yeah. So the question is, I love Harris. She will do better than Clinton, who was perfect, who only lost because of sexism and racism, but wouldn't that be more of an issue? And then their head explodes, like in a Star Trek thing. Like, so that's the challenge, right? Like that is like, even if Liz Warren, I could get, oh, that's what you are, buddy. I'm sorry, you're thinking you think that Harris has a shot?
No, not Harris, but I feel like, if there were a version of Harris that had like really compelling like ideas and wanted to really like improve things for people and, sort of set the world on fire, yeah, she'd have a great chance.
But okay, so if there was a Shazam movie, if there was a Shazam movie that was good, it would have been good. Like, I don't know. So a version of Harris that is not Harris.
But it's not her in particular, but I think that you could, like, I think, you can absolutely have a woman of color running. It just can't be one who is just sort of milk toasty about a lot of stuff and doesn't necessarily,
But Harris is the candidate and
have a lot of it factor.
And Republicans are hit like Nikki Haley with her horrible, gross like the cards tell me that Biden won't make it to 86. It's like it felt like it's like a mob thing. It's like, yeah, he's not gonna make it. He won't make it to 86. Yikes! But it's very clear that Republicans are doing this. Like, look, okay, yeah, right. You voted for Biden last time. We accept that. Well, not publicly because we don't get Trump mad, but really, it's gonna be Harris. You don't want Harris, and they're going after her specifically in ways. I mean, Ted Cruz did things about her cackle, which is gross and shouldn't do that. But others are going about like arguably legitimate weaknesses she has. And the response has been she doesn't have those weaknesses. And if anyone in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania doesn't vote for her, they're racist and sexist, which is usually like insulting voters is always an effective method, but I'm not sure it'll work this time. So my sense is sort of this is I'm not saying that a woman of color couldn't win. I was saying this is the one, and where I get frustrated was, to me, when you're no one wants to hear this. I'm just going to be, no one's watching at this point, even if I cut it in half, so it's fine. But like, to me, when you have an almost 80-year-old, it's going to be like 90 at the end of it, going in, and the plan had always been a torch passing president, because you're a West Wing watcher, right? Where there's the idea like the only one they let Bartlett have would be losers because they don't, so if you wanted a torch passing vice president, your choices would have been a clear already star, so like a Stacey Abrams, so who's everything you just described, right? Charismatic and everyone loves whatever, a clear star, or
she's dazzling,
or Gretchen Whitmer, who's coming into her own in different ways, but like, can she win? The girlfriends won Michigan. She was kicking all kinds of ass. She's done it twice. She's built that coalition. It's
an exceptional collection of leather jackets.
She is Midwestern. She is very Midwestern in key ways that will obviously help. You're from that area, right? You probably can document why. And it's not just because she's white and Karras is Black. There are key reasons why Whitmer would do better. So those are the two options. You didn't. It felt like he chose a Mike Pence or George. He chose the vice president who is just supposed to shore up a part of the base, but I'm going to live forever. He sort of chose his own Joe Biden. And that's okay, because Obama was in his 40s and it's like, okay, here's my responsible vice president, but not clearly someone who's going to carry the torch for me.
Well, in addition to, swing voters, there's also the fact that, and, I'm going to get yelled at for this on Twitter, I'm sure, but like, Harris has some very serious issues in her prosecutorial record that turns out progressive as well.
I didn't want to say anything because they're so sensitive.
Gonna get mad at me. I don't care. I don't care. They're gonna get mad at me. But like, that's a real problem when you have people, when you have someone who has the potential to alienate both the more conservative swing voters and the progressive part of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and it's not a good record. It's actually, in certain ways, a pretty upsetting one, especially insofar as not letting her office not letting people out of prison because they needed more people to fight fires. Like, that's not good. It wasn't directly her, but it was her office. There are a lot of issues that people good issues.
If anyone has some problems with this, please feel free. I can give you many examples.
Yeah. The thing of not letting people free was interesting. Robin had written about this, the guy in Florida who was put back in jail. And there's a lot of people, and Clarence Thomas has a huge record of like, I don't care if they found the guy. And that always struck me as something of like, I think the left is if you think of the average person's response, the average person watched The Fugitive, right? So if you explain to them, it's like, well, okay, so this is what the Supreme Court does. Richard Kimball, he's been running across the country for years. He finds the one-armed man. He's the guy. And so instead of the end where like the day the running stopped, it's like, Clarence Thomas and Alito are like, no, the court, that still stands, even though you didn't do it. And I think you're good.
They'll just quote Scalia saying that being innocent, you don't have a right to due process just because you're innocent or whatever.
Actual innocence is not a reason to not execute someone.
Yep.
There's no reason to not execute someone. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think we get in trouble with this, but to me, I just sort of, I'm not saying I don't want to do the male thing of saying I'm looking at this objectively, but to me, it just seems that my concern is that Harris's strongest support are amongst ancestral Dems. So a lot of the Blue MAGA, it's like, she's awesome, but when did you last vote? Were you there with me voting for Kerry? Because I admit I'm one of those ancestral Dems, right? I'm voting, my parents are the ones voting for Mondale, and I was like, did anyone else do this? Like, it looks like he's really losing. Was it just you two guys? No. It's like, no. Your grandparents voted. Like everyone at church voted for Mondale. Don't worry, it's just not enough. I'm sorry, son. That's what being 10. What I learned. But I don't see, again, exciting folks like you about that prosecutorial record, and then the swing voters who. And again, it's like these are.
And there's also, I'm sorry to say this, but like there are a lot of people who immediately went cold when she was like, "No, we need to keep the health insurance companies around." Like people, like private health insurance is not as popular as people really seem to think it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm someone who's obviously going to vote for Democrats. Like anyone who's said is going to vote for, but the Biden coalition, if you're in denial about what the Biden 2020 coalition was, which was people who had rejected Hillary Clinton, but voted for Trump, but said, okay, I don't, fine, but I can accept. And implicit in a lot of Biden, and even Joe Biden was hinting at this, was that he's the white guy that they trust from Pennsylvania. And so he can't, the idea that he sort of magically transfers that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I just hope he's reannounced. I hope he gets, but I just wish, I mean, he's starting to elevate some of the, but it's there. And I wish there was more of a real sense of how do we challenge this? Because this is what they're coming.
I mean,
it has to be on her.
The primary debates are going to be real awkward. Like, because right now it's Joe Biden, Robert F. Kennedy, and Marianne Williamson. Like,
I saw that as of now they weren't planning on having primary debates.
Probably not.
I'm just saying it would be, they got to throw like, one of the Tim Ryans in there. Just make it sort of less weird.
God, can you imagine though, like a question about vaccines, and then you got RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, and then Joe Biden.
I mean,
make him look good, but boy, would that be just a very, very awkward.
It's better.
Saturday
I mean,
Night Live level, like when Saturday Night Live was good.
Yeah, like don't even bother. You've got those things would be a disaster.
It would be so awkward.
I think Biden should just send Harris to do those debates.
Yeah.
Just delegate them just as part of his job. So yeah, we'll definitely cut this in half. One will air Sunday, one will air Monday. Then I'll just have to
need like a big like to be continued.
Oh, I can clip that, or you can just say it again. To be continued, and then Jamie can say previously on.
Yes, yeah.
And then it's like you just see the stuff of like Clarence Thomas or whatever. Oh, right. So that's gonna be in this one. So thank you, Jamie, for joining us and being angry.
Always a pleasure to get to rant.
And thank you, as always, Robin.
And thank you, Stephen. That's my really like newscastery voice.